without further ado, we're going to kick it off with the first session. This is a face that I'm sure many of you will recognise, and if anyone can share insights on key learnings from reopening and sort of getting prepared for the new normal, then it is Nick Sautner. So Nick, I'm going to stop talking now and hand it over to you.
Thanks, Katie, and tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No mai, haere mai, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you everyone for joining. My name's Nick Sautner, I'm Chief Executive of Eden Park. Today I'm going to go through approximately a 30-minute presentation. I always find it, I suppose, much easier to engage when doing a presentation when you do have an audience. And as we have all learned over the last 12 months to live with Zoom, I'm sure everyone on this call will be looking forward to the ability to meet back in person, hopefully in the UK later this year. I'm going to just pull up some slides that I've prepared for today as just a talking point. And if there are any questions throughout, I know that we can do that later on in the presentation. But I do want to share some insights from Eden Park. As many of you be aware, Eden Park is New Zealand's national stadium. And I've got approximately 7 slides to go through today, talking about what 2020 looked like for us, some of the strategies and I suppose the rethinking that we've done over the last 12 months in relation to our strategic priorities, but then also a theory and a practice of emerging stronger. Some of the innovation and agility that we've shown as a business, and some of the recent announcements that we've had that I'm sure everyone will be excited to hear about. So I'll go to our next slide. So just for everyone's benefit, it has been an unprecedented impact on our business, and like most of the stadium and tourism sector, we've been required to pivot, be agile and look at new revenues. We terminated our match day revenues pretty much overnight, and that was on the 23rd of March last year. New Zealand has had 4 lockdowns, the longest for just over a 4-week period. But one of the things I wanted to emphasise, and the learnings that we've taken from 2020, is that there is undoubtedly going to be a renaissance, that people want to go and experience live sport again and have that escapism that we know that we can create in our particular venues. We as a business, we were proactive in terms of our measures that we took. Unfortunately for our business, we're required to make 10% of our workforce redundant, but we also then put a variety of roles into hibernation, from whether it be 20% right through to 80%. And that meant that coming out the other side with our event calendar, we knew we needed to be in a strong position, and that was reflective in our sellout crowds at Super Rugby Aotearoa once our alert levels reached level 1. In terms of the alert levels in New Zealand, there were 4 alert levels, and for Eden Park and all stadiums in this country, it was very challenging to operate under any alert level bar level 1 to have business as usual. We were able under level 2 to host fixtures with pods of 100, but it was very challenging to make that commercially viable. And we're fortunate enough we have been in a situation where we haven't been required to implement those events under any other level than alert level 1. We have had cancellations, and that has had a significant impact on our direct and indirect revenues. But again, we've had some very supportive icon partners, along with our membership program that has been able to be retained at over 85% over the last 12 months, irrespective of the disruption to our event calendar. In terms of our strategic plan, I'll come to that and give some examples of what we've been able to deliver post-COVID. When I say post-COVID, New Zealand today has no community cases, and we have 7 cases within isolation facilities. So obviously that's a very positive sign in terms of the team of 5 million and the work that has been done from the population, but also from government policy. In relation to the arts and culture, it has been seen that some of the mental health challenges we've faced through COVID, even the government has acknowledged that once live sport and entertainment is returned, it really does demonstrate business confidence. And there was a business confidence survey showing that 9 out of 10 people said that once rugby returns to Eden Park, that means confidence has returned back to the sector, to the economy. We did look at our vision and our mission and our game plan. Our vision has always been to be acknowledged as New Zealand's national stadium and deliver world-class live events. That didn't change, but our mission, we wanted to demonstrate that broader community appeal that we could deliver during this challenging period. And that meant whether it be adopting COVID testing stations, pivoting to utilise idle capacity in our production kitchens to enable meals to be prepared and then delivered during the lockdown period, or indeed looking at post-COVID and post-lockdown, what the business model would look like. We have 7 values and behaviours that our team adopts throughout being the benchmark on and off the field. That's our game plan. And it starts with customer service. We talk about attention to detail, strong governance and accountability, building a level of comfort with all stakeholders. And I'll come to that when we talk about COVID and the response and how public confidence was able to be achieved through some of the messaging that we delivered. Celebrating the achievements. We've been fortunate enough to have a number of sellout events post our lockdown in March last year. And there was an acknowledgement to all those essential service workers at each of those fixtures for the work they've been able to keep New Zealand safe. We exceed expectations with the detail and the delivery protocols, and commercialisation opportunities through innovation makes up our game plan. In relation to a revised 3-year strategic plan, it was something that we felt was going to be critical for the next 3 years as we rebuild not only Eden Park's economy, but also New Zealand's economy. That was based around 9 strategic priorities and has just been endorsed by our board. The number 1 priority was around our council engagement and resource consent framework. Today, for those who may or may not have read the news, Eden Park announced its first concert. We were fortunate enough to be granted resource consent for 6 concerts annually. We are located in a residential area, but as with many of the venues on the call today, those are also located in residential areas. And I often make the comment that in 70 AD, the Colosseum was built and it was in a residential area. So I think stadiums have a great way of connecting with the community, but also bringing people together. Touches on our 2nd strategic priority in terms of the community and how we can innovate with the community, particularly around the hospitality sector that's been so decimated by COVID and the closures that have resulted as a result and in relation to the alert levels. With regard to Eden Park, we're a strategic asset for the country and we're a community asset for the local area. And as such, what we're looking to do is develop a business case to put a roof on and see the next iteration of the development of Eden Park. As far as our organisational culture and capability, we have had to make some changes, but over the next 3 years, we'll have 3 Women's World Cups. And we knew that the expertise and knowledge within our business was needed to be retained. And we were fortunate enough to be able to do partial and hibernation of roles to ensure that then our staff coming out the other side were prepared and ready to go through this rebuilding of the business model. Content is king. We've been able to work with our hirers. If international borders haven't been open, we've looked to develop localised content to maximise attendances and utilisation at the venue, but also work with our partners to implement significant projects. And I'll come to that with Samsung with an 80 metre by 8 metre LED screen that's been installed at the park as a result of a partnership during the lockdown period and making sure that the fan experience post-COVID was going to be at the level that we expected. In terms of our financial consolidation and the foundations we've built over the last 3 years, like everyone, COVID has significantly impacted our business model. But what we've been able to do is create additional value for our members, for our commercial partners, and demonstrate to them the confidence that they've got in staying with us through this challenging time. The business has also looked to improve our business practices and also our environmental initiatives. We wanted to ensure that staff during the lockdown period or during the disruption caused by the lockdown had worthy projects to be able to implement and demonstrate their skill set and capability whilst also obtaining additional learnings. For us, an additional element was to ensure that our Māori strategy was implemented and honoured at the park. We'll touch on that later in terms of some of the initiatives we've done in that regard, leading into next year to Matatini, the Edinburgh Tattoo of New Zealand. The final priority has been in terms of equality and inclusion and developing a strategy to ensure that our bathrooms in particular are gender appropriate for our 3 Women's World Cups over the next 3 years, but also then ensuring that our entire facilities are mobility and accessibility focused. So ensuring that when people come to our events, it is an inclusive culture. With regard to the COVID response, we implemented a strategy immediately to emerge stronger. And we knew, and I know that this terminology will have been heard by many around the new normal and what that meant. For us, we really focused on some key areas to ensure that people felt still connected. We know our industry is all about relationships. So we felt that it was important that we kept our meetings focused, that as leaders within the industry, we remain positive. And I can't reiterate enough that I know how challenging it's been across the event sector, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. That what we have seen at Eden Park is once people can return and once people are confident, they return with an additional, I suppose, appeal towards live sport and entertainment that we haven't seen in many years, particularly around all levels. We always sell out our All Blacks content, but our Super Rugby numbers have doubled post-COVID as people have that appetite and desire to see that escapism, but also to engage with their community and with their fellow Kiwis. In terms of the support throughout this challenging period, we knew that it was going to be important. And one of those support mechanisms was to ensure that once we had the ability to get people back in the office, we got people back in the office. We didn't want people working remotely because we wanted them to ensure that they were okay, that they were working with their colleagues and again, rebuilding the Eden Park business model. In terms of our operations, we have adopted some new practices throughout the COVID, I suppose, period. We've looked at what areas we could continue to implement throughout and what procedures we've adopted throughout that time that then were relevant moving forward. So that innovation and that planning moving forward has seen some real learnings that I'll touch on when we come to it. In terms of the overlap of some stages, we looked at a weeks, months and years strategy. Originally, it was around the immediate disruption. The months was around what the new normal looked like and the impacts and expectations of our patrons. And then the years was around how we adapt as a world to ensure that international content can continue to come into New Zealand and what the expectations were from our stakeholders, our codes, our government and our patrons and fans. In terms of our reopening, I wanted to just touch on a couple of points, and I'm going to play a couple of videos just to keep people interested, but also to see some of what we've been able to deliver over the last 12 months. A key point for us has been communication in advance to people attending the events, but also our community and the confidence that we were able to deliver. But keeping connected with our community was central to our strategy to keep people engaged with the park. So I'm just going to flick over to one video, so just one moment.
as countries across the globe have adapted to an ongoing pandemic, perhaps none have done so with more success than New Zealand. The island nation enjoys a sense of normalcy, where natives like middleweight champion Israel Adesanya can revel in one of Oceania's most storied pastimes.
Very lucky to be joined by Israel Adesanya. Thank you so much for joining us. What would you bring to an All Blacks team?
Flying knees. We are at Eden Park Stadium, about to watch the All Blacks smoke the Wallabies. But before that, I'm gonna go on the roof, get high as You are now witnessing myself get high, and that's right next to the world beater, Joseph Parker. I am about to walk on top of Eden Park Stadium. Honestly, this is dope. It's the biggest attending crowd post-COVID. The little things and the big things. Having a drink, being out in public. It is electric, it is electric. But I don't mind the photos here, because it's a time and place. You know, I'm in a public space. Everyone can see what's happening, and it's cool just to interact with people. And we're on.
Quality finish from the All Blacks.
That was fun.
So good.
That was epic. I love it. Little moments like that, you gotta take advantage. Hey, bro.
George Rich, he'll show you around.
Hey, brother, how are you? That was a good game out there. Watch them. I only know bad words in Fiji.
Oh, true.
Oh, long time. I saw you last time.
Yeah, that's
Hey,
right.
how you, man? Sure, brother. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Likewise. Wow, peace. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Oh, we smoked them. All Blacks smoked the Wallabies at Eden Park, of course, at home, undefeated, and still since '93. Okay, do it from here. I think do it from here. You sure? Oh, bro, I'm an athlete. It's off. No. All right, we're off.
Adesanya's lifestyle is supported by a success in the octagon.
But in terms of the key messaging from our side, we wanted to ensure that when we came out the other side, people felt confident in returning to the park. And there were some key activations that we did in terms of signage, sanitising stations, and messaging to ensure that people did see the safety measures that were put in place. In terms of utilisation of the stadium, it was a project team that we looked at to say, what are those possibilities and what are those activations that we can continue, whether it be at alert level 1 to 4. We implemented our golf tournament within the stadium, knowing that there was a limited number of players within the park that was required, and ensuring that social distancing was available. Our stadium glamping was able to continue operating. We launched as shown in the previous clip, our Sky Sport rooftop tour. We emphasised the importance of the community benefit, and we were able to launch our refugee garden at the park in an underutilised space, but also we looked to implement dark kitchens, as mentioned earlier, where groups could come in and utilise our kitchens, idle capacity within our infrastructure, and then produce delivered meals around Auckland and New Zealand. Our final project throughout that time was in development with HG Turf to develop a HG Hero Eden Park edition. We replaced our entire field, and as I mentioned earlier, with the installation of the 40 metre by 8 metre LED Samsung screen, it meant that 2 fan-first particular experiences were implemented, that coming out the other side, people had the opportunity to see what had been delivered. Those fan enhancements has really paid dividends for us. Throughout that process, we also looked to engage with our partners and implement new initiatives. We knew and we joked to many that people were craving to attend the park. Working with Toro, we implemented Toro Turf Cam, where people could watch grass grow at Eden Park and get that escapism throughout the lockdown period. So people could log on to our Turf Cam and see Eden Park on a daily basis. And we had on some days thousands of people logging onto our turf cam to see the grass being grown or to see what had been actually occurring at the park. In relation to our food and beverage offer, as many would obviously be aware that coming out of COVID, a different approach is needed, and we've implemented a click and collect system within our food and beverage outlets that should enhance the fan experience post-COVID, but also for all events moving forward. In relation to our future, I mentioned earlier that today we announced SIX60 as our first concert for April 24. This has been something that's been 118 years in the making, and from a venue perspective, we feel will be a paradigm shift in what we're able to deliver for the park. It's been a huge effort from our team, but we know that sport and entertainment is craved by Kiwis and craved around the globe. And for us now to be able to deliver concerts and to think in just under 6 weeks we'll have 50,000 people at the park with no restrictions is something that we're very proud of. That's going to present challenges, but also it needs to ensure that our procedures and protocols are up to speed. But I think it does show, and the response with today's announcement, that people want to get back and they want to experience those events. And so for everyone on the call today, I'm sure that that will be the same case for you at your respective venues. In the next 3 years, we do have 3 Women's World Cups with cricket, rugby and football being hosted at the park. I mentioned earlier about the development of HG Hero Eden Park Edition. One of the focuses for our team now is to be able to develop concepts and export that to other stadiums. So whether it be a turf product, whether it be a stadium glamping, whether it be rooftop tour or zip lines or other community initiatives, we want to explore how we can work as a collective and adapt new procedures to ensure that all venues are able to implement, whether it be sports events or concert events, with confidence. Throughout our concert consent, we felt that there was going to be a need for us to really emphasise the humour and the personality of the park. And how we did that was through a number of campaigns, all done internally through creativity. The one that I'm going to show you now is a replica of a scene out of Love Actually, but it was something that we put together with our neighbourhood. And one of the things that we've really emphasised over the last 3 years, but particularly over the last 12 months, is the importance of our community. So this is a little community video that we filmed to just showcase our partnership with our people.
Who is it?
It's carol singers.
Give him $1 and tell him to bugger off.
So in terms of our concert consent, throughout that process, we had over 3,000 residents put in submissions of support. Looking back only 3 years ago, we had a fractured relationship with our community because the Hood, a neighbourhood supporters club we created, was to ensure that we could connect with our community. And that has certainly been one of the real positives arising out of a pretty bleak 12 months, has been our ability to connect with our neighbourhood and work with that community engagement to ensure that they realised the place that we could perform and offer to the community, but also to see what we could in return receive and offer from them. So from our side, as much as the last 12 months has been challenging with a variety of cancelled events, we're really focused on new initiatives, innovation and product development to ensure coming out the other side we were prepared for a post-COVID stadium operation. So Katie, that was my last slide. I thought if there was an opportunity, if there was any questions around New Zealand and our operations over the last 12 months.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to start off saying thank you so much for that, Nick. It was really interesting, and it's definitely one of those, you know, I'm sure there's a few people out there that are very jealous that, you know, you guys in New Zealand, you definitely showed the way of how to do it right when it came to the pandemic. You know, we've definitely not got it right in other parts of the world. But you know, that's amazing news. Then, you know, you're going to be, what is it, the world's first stadium come April to reopen to a full capacity 50,000 crowd. So I mean, you know, I take it, are you sold out already, or how's that going?
So the announcement happened today. The response has been enormous. We're very proud that post the first lockdown, we were able to sell out the park for an All Blacks fixture and 3 Super Rugby fixtures. So we do think that in a 12-month period in a post-COVID world, Auckland and New Zealand and Eden Park, New Zealand's national stadium, will arguably have the biggest sports and the biggest entertainment event post-COVID. And it's a credit to the 3,000 casual staff on an event day that are able to implement that, but also the team of 5 million that our Prime Minister refers to, about them following what has been required. I think the next chapter for everyone is around vaccination and what that means for touring teams and their ability to come into the country without isolation. Australia and New Zealand are working on a travel bubble currently, and Australia's looking for a travel bubble into Singapore. That also is going to be critical. We have seen 2 Women's World Cups postponed over the last 6 months. So we saw the Cricket World Cup being pushed out to 2022, and in recent weeks, the announcement of the Women's World Cup for 2021 to be pushed out a further 12 months. So I think event organisers are now looking towards 2022 with surety, knowing that a vaccine will be rolled out across most countries, and then having that surety of borders to be able to then be able to implement and be in a position where events can go ahead freely.
And what would you say, you know, obviously, you know, I know sort of one of the times that we did an interview with you back in 2020, you'd just done a a sold out rugby event, and we saw the images, and you know, we could even see people perhaps on, well, maybe the best seats in the house, which were like on top of the stands. And then obviously, like you said, you did have cancelled events as well. So, you know, sort of what would you say were your key learnings that perhaps other people, you know, especially like in the UK, you know, that their reopening strategy is, you know, come, I think it's June the 21st, as long as everything goes to plan, then there are no restrictions. So, you know, what would you say are your key learnings and sort of best practices that came out of that?
So the key learnings for us was to ensure that there was clear communications in advance about the expectations. Some of those expectations were stay at home if you're sick, whether it be a staff member or indeed a patron. QR codes are installed throughout the entire venue that enables people to scan in, whether it be with their ticket, but also with a QR code. We in New Zealand have developed a Bluetooth tracker, and we've encouraged people to switch that on in their phone, so we know exactly where people are going within the facility. Another point that we saw was that gave confidence was around signage throughout the venue, so the protocols and procedures around signage, but then also sanitising stations, to have that confidence that 360 sanitising stations throughout the facility, and ensuring that people did use those. And I think the other piece for us was that because New Zealand had taken the response that we'd taken, that there was confidence in the community that COVID was contained. There was an eradication strategy. There were 0 community cases, so people felt confident whether it be going to a supermarket or going to a stadium, and they actually craved it. And we saw that when games were played in closed stadium environments, the feedback what people were saying was it just wasn't the same experience without a crowd. And so I really think that that's something that we will see an increase in ticket sales in 2022 to what we saw in 2020 or 19. People will want to go and see live sport and entertainment. They've missed out on it for 2 years. They've missed out on connecting with their family or whānau and friends. And this is going to be something that I think the industry is going to need to sort of upskill and upscale, because there have been people lost to the industry. They've retrained into other career paths, and that's why it was going to be so critical for us around ensuring that when we did come out the other side, whether it be the receptionist, we retained our receptionist and put the role into hibernation, because we didn't want to be in a situation to try and retrain a receptionist with the detail that we know that our receptionist and the knowledge of the stadium leading into. And that first match that you referred to, our Prime Minister announced at 4 o'clock on a Monday we were going to level 1. We had 43,000 people that 5 days later for the Super Rugby fixture. That wouldn't have been possible if roles had been disestablished. It was the need for us to act with that hibernation mindset in the ability to then re-engage our staff. And they were just so excited to be back, working at the park and delivering their jobs that we're also passionate about in this industry.